What's up everybody and welcome back to the channel. In this video for the First Descendant today, we are returning back to Ajax. A couple of weeks before the drop of Season 3, I released a build video for Ajax, which was kind of like focused on basically turning him into Super Mario. I don't know what to say. And essentially, you kind of like just spammed the second ability as often as you could, which would mean that you'd go hurtling through the air and jump on enemies or next to enemies and cause massive amounts of AoE damage. And it was certainly a different way of playing, that's for sure. On the other hand, it was also dealing a boatload of damage, so you know what's not to like about that. So of course, with the release of Season 3, we have trigger modules added to the game, as well as some other changes and things made, but mostly the trigger modules. And so I wanted to return to this build and essentially make it ready for Axion planes. The sad reality about it is, unfortunately, that while it is still viable, the damage fall off between doing 400% infiltrations and Sigma and Axion is just too much for this build to feel as good as it did before. So some changes had to be made. Now the good news is that with those changes, and unfortunately we do take away, let's say, the core identity of that original build, which was jump as many fucking times as you can. With the changes that we do bring in, we kind of like streamline the damage and the way that we can stack the damage a lot better. And it allows us to, I would say, reach like the upper level of damage that we can essentially expect from this particular Transcendent mod, as well as this particular configuration for Ajax. And now, yes, he's still very good at 400% infiltrations and Sigma, but can also compete damage-wise now in Axion planes, where, let's be honest, we're all going to be trapped for the next couple of weeks / months. So it's good to have a little bit of variety, you know, a little bit of options, a little bit of things that you could play instead of the meta and so on. And Ajax absolutely slams, does a decent amount of damage, and actually looks pretty damn cool while doing it. So if you're interested in the build, go ahead, let's check it out. So starting us off, like I said, unfortunately, let's address the elephant in the room here, and that is that we have moved away from our original Transcendent mods, which we were using, which was Void Charge. This was the mod that we were originally using, and this mod was focused around the second skill, which is Void Walk, which had then changed into something called Void Charge, and then you could stack it twice, and essentially you would jump everywhere. What Void Charge also does is it takes a certain percentage of your defense and actually adds that onto the damage. So there was a natural way for you to essentially stack your damage by, you know, obviously just making yourself more tough. And certainly I tried that out, and I tried lots of different ways to essentially, you know, make this as good as I can possibly make it. But at the same time, I also started experimenting with Void Explosion. Now think of Void Explosion as the counterpart to Void Charge, where Void Charge makes your second ability shine, Void Explosion makes your third ability shine, which is the explosion that he kind of like radiates out from his body. And the combo was you would go jump and then explode and jump and explode and jump and explode. That was the combo with Void Charge. Whereas, or jump explode, jump explode. Whereas now what we're doing is we're focusing on Void Explosion being the juice of the build. So you'll jump, it does not have stacks anymore, you only have one available, so you got to work a little bit sparingly with it, but not that bad because your cooldown's still super low. But explosions, Void Explosion is the big fucking deal here, because that goes boom boom, and you can do it twice because you can stack it twice. And this just deals a shitload of damage and kind of like wipes the floors with all the enemies that are around you. So that's the first big change in the build from what we had prior. So while not as Super Mario as it was before, there's still a little bit of Mario left in Ajax here. The other cool thing that I also just want to mention at this point in time is that you can actually do this with normal Ajax as well. So whether you want to go Void Charge or Void Explosion, both these mods work on just normal Ajax as well. So if you've never researched Ultimate Ajax, have no fear. This build works on normal Ajax as well, just in case you wanted to build it that way. The other thing that we also have to bear in mind is, and if I can just unslot that mod quickly, is you'll notice that previously we were also kind of like when we had Void, so let me put Void Charge in there for us. When we had Void Charge in, we were actually having a situation where our damage types were split, right? So we had non-attribute tech on Void Charge, and we had non-attribute dimension on Expulsion. Now this was an interesting thing though. In my previous build, I still stacked most of my damage into tech, But it did allow us, because we were dealing dimension damage, it did allow us to actually, for instance, use something like Peacemaker inside the build, right? But now when we actually change it up and we take Void Charge out and we use Void Explosion, the benefit that we have there is our damage types are unified. So that can be seen as definitely a pro, because now we are kind of like funneling all our damage towards one specific goal, and that is non-attribute tech. As you can see here, both damage types are non-attribute tech, so that's a good way for us to go. Then onto the actual mods themselves. The most important thing for us here is that we want to stack as much damage as possible. This is a raw damage build, so we're not stacking any crit hit or crit hit damage, because the base crit stats for Ajax, where he starts from before you start slotting mods and stuff in, is fairly low. And so therefore it's kind of like better just to build him raw power, or at the very least that's the way that I decided to do it. Good news about that as well is that it does free up quite a few mod slots for us, and it means that we can really hone in on stacking as much damage into the different damage buckets as we can, so that we can basically do that. So a lot of our mods are going to be about that. We also want to be stacking range, because we want our AoEs, because that's how we kill. We want them to be massive. We're also going to be stacking a lot of cooldown, because we want them all the time. So having a 2-second cooldown on a 2-stack Void Explosion is really good. It means that shit is always available. You never run out. And having a 4-second jump is also good, because you can rotate it in. It's a very cool way to essentially move around the battlefield and all that stuff. So good to go. But in any case, enough waffling. Let's get into the actual mods. Just in case you would just want to take a screenshot, there you go. But the explanation here is as follows. So our first two mods that we can talk about is the 2 amp mods: Tech Amplification and Non-Attribute Amplification. So of course these are our damage types. So Tech Amplification gives us Tech Skill Power Modifier, but it tanks our critical hit rate, which is fine, we don't care about that. And Non-Attribute Amplification gives us non-attribute skill power and tanks our critical hit damage. Again, not an issue, because we're not building crit. Then alongside that, we can also stack more damage and do more cooldown reduction by using the 2 focus mods. Focus on Tech gives us Tech Skill Power Modifier and gives us a little bit of skill cooldown, and Non-Attribute Skill Power gives us exactly that, or rather Focus on Non-Attribute gives us non-attribute skill power and a little bit of skill cooldown. So they're kind of like hitting 2 birds with 1 stone. Now, at the same time, while we still stick with the whole cooldown topic, we can absolutely put in Nimble Fingers, because that gives us more skill cooldown. And last but not least, to close the loop on the whole skill cooldown thing, we can put in MP Conversion, all right? Both of these, Nimble Fingers and MP Conversion, give us skill cooldown reduction. MP Conversion gives us slightly more, but it also does cost us a little bit of our max MP, but that's also all right. Then addressing this issue with the range that I spoke about before, because we want to range cap ourselves, or get at least as close as possible to the range cap as we can, so that we can make sure that those AoEs reach as far as we want them to reach. We are going to use something called Skill Expansion, which is a massive skill effect range boost for us of 92.3%. And then we're going to couple that with Amplification Control, which is a skill effect range boost for us as well as a small max shield increase, which, you know, let's be honest, it ain't that bad. Now, the last 2 mods that we're going to talk about here, I would say one of them is a flex mod. The other one is something that I would highly advise you to actually use. The one that I would highly advise you to use, or at least something similar to this, is Strong Mentality. Strong Mentality says our skill cost is 15.2% less. This is important because the bottom line is, in long fights where you have to, especially if you're playing solo, where you have to kill 250 or 300 enemies and you have to be jumping around a lot and exploding a lot, unless you diligently make sure that you always pick up every blue brick that you can as soon as it falls out of an enemy's ass, you will sometimes run into MP issues. It's just an unfortunate fucking byproduct of this build. The MP cost for his skills are very expensive, and you are spamming the fuck out of them. So Strong Mentality absolutely helps you to deal with that issue. It still doesn't make you impervious to mana fucking drain. You can still run into issues if you don't watch what you're doing and if you don't kind of manage this in a way, but this is a big step in the right direction to helping you out a little bit. So this I would absolutely advise. There's of course other mods that you can take that do similar things or so on. You can also just increase your mana regen or something like that. But this, alongside a decent set of external components, which we're going to look at just now, is absolutely, I would say, necessary for you to be able to stay in the fight longer. All right. The other slot, which I said is a flex slot, is Spear and Shield. Now, Spear and Shield gives you a decent amount of defense, which is good for us because we are in the thick of it. We're constantly jumping down fucking enemies' throats and everything like that. So you're right in there. So being more tanky and being able to take more damage is always a good thing. But this also does give you a small amount of skill power as well, which is the other reason why I think it's a good option. There are, of course, many other choices that you can put in as well. One other one which I can highly recommend is Dangerous Ambush. Because Dangerous Ambush says that when landing a skill attack while the enemy is not targeting you, you get a certain amount of skill power. Now, generally speaking, if you're playing solo, this is hard to get. You either have to kill enemies as soon as they spawn before they can even target you, or otherwise, basically, you don't get this bonus. However, on skill attack against an immobilized enemy, skill power plus basically 50%. Now, one of your skills actually immobilizes enemies. So this over here, your jump, has a stun built into it that it stuns enemies for the duration of 5 seconds. So if for some reason an enemy doesn't just outright fucking die to you jumping on them, then it means they're going to be stunned, and it means that your follow-up attack, which will most likely be a void explosion if you have dangerous ambush equipped, will be big and will be dealing 50% more damage. You say, well, not necessarily, but that specific damage bucket will be 50% stronger. So it is a really good option and definitely something to consider. I kind of like wax and wane between the two. I do like the additional survivability that I get with Spear and Shield and not having to necessarily look around and see, shit, I gotta pick up a red brick, otherwise I'm gonna fucking explode. So it's kind of like the reason why I lean more towards Spear and Shield. But absolutely, Dangerous Ambush just for raw damage output is phenomenal. So this is the setup right here. Let's talk about trigger modules. Now, again, with trigger modules, I tested a few different things. Of course, because our main damage dealing skill, or the one that we kind of want to accentuate, is our third skill. Gap in Time seems like it would be a good choice, but the only problem that we are actually stacking a shitload of skill cooldown, which kind of like makes Gap in Time, you know, poopies. The other thing that is also quite interesting is battering ram, and I tested this quite a bit as well because it kind of like naturally feeds into something which you tend to sort of maybe do by default with Ajax, and that is stack his defense, like in the case of us taking Spear and Shield. So battering ram, basically what it does is it deals like an earthquake, and the damage is proportionate to your defense times a percentage, and it inflicts a taunt. Now, I messed around with this a lot, and the earthquake is cute. The taunt is cute. The issue is, I would say that predominantly most of the time, like, the taunt doesn't necessarily matter because you outright fucking murder stuff by just jumping and exploding next to it once. So the only thing you'd really be taunting is bosses and stuff like that. And yes, if you do run this in a group and you want to see yourself as like the tank of the fucking group or something like that, then yeah, maybe this could work out. But predominantly most of the time I play solo, and so again, that taunt, like, I'm getting fucking attacked in any case because it's just me, doesn't necessarily matter all that much. So the bottom line is battering ram is okay from a utility perspective, but if you just want pure damage, all right, Power Beyond is gonna be the best way to go. Power Beyond is a flat 15% if you have the best in slot rolled one, flat 15% skill power increase on top, and that's just a lot of additional damage that you can essentially deal. So it's kind of like really bad to leave that on the floor unless, you know, I don't know, like I said, you want to fulfill that tank fantasy or something like that. That's the setup right there. Now, moving us on to weapons, this is again kind of like a no-brainer because you guys know that if we have tech as a damage profile, we gotta go with the Secret Garden. Secret Garden, of course, the reason why we do that is its unique ability. If you're using a tech skill, you get Pest Control. Pest Control is a damage stacking buff that you get that gives you more skill power per stack, and you basically get this just by using tech skills. Both of your damage dealing skills are tech skills, and so therefore this is really good. If we were running just the jump around mod, then like I said before near the beginning of this video, then you could, you know, consider using something like Peacemaker, because Peacemaker actually rotates into dimension and fusion abilities, and your one ability would be a dimension ability in the previous build that I made for this, the jump around build. And so then Peacemaker could actually be a very good stat stick. But since both our abilities are tech, Secret Guard is the way to go. Now, since it's a stat stick, you don't have to put a single thing into it, right? You can just take like a fucking empty ass Secret Garden and you would get the additional damage there. However, I do or have built my Secret Garden out because, and specifically into crit and crit hit damage, because every once in a while, instead of jumping 2 or 3 times to get across the map to go kill something, or because my explosions can't reach fast enough, I'll just bust this out to shoot the guy in the head like 3 times and he'll die. So this works really well. This is a decent build for Secret Garden that puts out a little bit of deeps. All right. But the bottom line is you could also just carry it as a stat stick and you'll be 100% fine. In terms of my weapon cores and my substats, again here, this only really matters if you want to build it out. However, I do want to draw your attention to the fact that you do have the ability to put 2 sprint speed or a grapple hook and a sprint speed on Secret Garden, which again just makes it a really good weapon to carry in your hands, because you're able to get across the map faster and you're just moving faster in general, which is always, you know, like a really good thing for just moving and doing content very fast. That's basically the point. So then let me just quickly move my face over here. That brings us on to reactors, of course. So you want a materialized mechanics reactor. That's because you want it to be non-attribute in tech. Both your skills are non-attribute in tech, so makes a lot of sense right there. And of course, make sure that whichever gun, in this case Secret Garden, you have, that Secret Garden is a tactical rifle, so make sure that that is what the mounting that you have. Otherwise you're leaving 60% of additional damage fucking on the ground, so you know, don't do that. In terms of your substats, you have options here, right? You could do like cost reduction, for instance. Here you could do that would be something if you really find that you're having a hard time just, you know, keeping your mana going, and for some reason you're just not picking up any blue bricks or anything like that. This could be a way for you to deal with that situation. I decided to go raw power. You can of course do even more range here. You can do cooldown here. In other words, you make your cooldowns even less, so you could have your jump back at, like, let's say every 2.8 seconds or something like that. But the bottom line is I went for more non-attribute skill power boost as well as more tech skill power boost, which is just more damage in the tank. And that just kind of like, because my feeling is, yes, I could make skills cost less, or I could just make the skills deal more damage and fucking kill enemies with 1 hit, or possibly 2, which means that mana is not a problem because they are dead. So that's your reactor you want there. In terms of your external components, guys, it's a non-attribute Descendant that deals skill power. You know you're going to be using Enlightened Mage. It's just one of those things. So Enlightened Mage is the best, obviously, because once you get to 3 stacks of truth, you get non-attribute skill power boost, or rather non-attribute skill power of 84%, which is just massive. And so that's definitely what you want to go for. In terms of your mods on your armor, you want to go max HP and defense. You want to make yourself as thick as possible. If you do that on all 4 pieces, you're going to sit at about almost 8k HP, which sounds like very little, but the point is you're almost sitting at 90k defense. So you're really going to be able to soak those hits. So you'll be just fine. Then in terms of like your substats on the external components, of course, this is a skill power build, so you want to, or a skill based build, so you want to go MP recovery out of combat and max HP. You want to go max MP and MP recovery in combat. You want to go defense, MP recovery modifier, and last but not least, your processor doesn't really matter because there's not a lot of great substats to choose from here. I went max shield, shield recovery modifier. You can also do toxic resistance and shield, max shield, whatever, something like that. But yeah, the sky's the limit there, because the point is there's not really that many viable choices there for us. The most important 3 parts are the most important 3 items are the first 3. All right, so your auxiliary power, your sensor, and your memory. Then Arche Tuning. All right, so yeah, I didn't actually change all that much from the previous iteration of this build, which was still the jump around one. So you're kind of like going to go here, you're going to get yourself some additional skill power here, you're going to go all the way around, get some skill cost reduction, which surely does come in handy. Get yourself some range, hell yeah. Get the skill power there, go all the way up to skill cooldown over here, and then zip around to the side here, grabbing yourself your mutant cell with non-attribute cohesion, which again is another way for you to stack non-attribute skill power, and that is going to get you just even more of a damage buff as soon as you're in the thick of it, and you're basically, you know, fighting all of the enemies that want a piece of that ass. Then I believe our last stop will be the Inversion Reinforcement. So over here specifically, what you're looking for is I ended up opting for just as much as possible survivability as I could get my hands on, as well as trying to just help myself out a little bit with MP. So deploy resonance device here with its skill duration increase and stuff like that. Yeah, it's not really, I mean, we don't really care about duration. But I went for shield particle reconfiguration here, which is when you are hit by an enemy, it gives you this defensive buff, which basically gives you more defense and more max shield based on the amount of defense that you have. We have a shitload of defense, so this is a fairly substantial damage buff. Sorry, fairly substantial survivability buff for us, right? Defense buff for us. That coupled with selective neurostimulation, which is a MP sort of stat thing here for us that helps us deal with potential MP issues, and every once in a while we'll get some of our MP back and everything like that. And as you stay in the fights, this can sometimes, I mean, at a low 10% chance, this can essentially, you know, recover massive amounts of your resources and so on. So it's just another way for you to essentially just stay in the fight longer. And then last but not least, guys, this is, again, this is skill power build, a skill damage build. So skill cooldown tends to be very valuable for builds like that, and in this build it's also true. So you want to get arc circulation tactic here, which gives you skill cooldown minus 24% for 10 seconds, and this has a cooldown of 25 seconds. That means at certain parts of the fight you're going to have extremely low cooldowns. You'll be able to spam the fuck out of your abilities. If you're lucky, this falls within a boss rotation or yellow bar rotation or something like that, and you absolutely just smash them out. And that's gonna be it for the build. Thank you so much for watching, especially if you made it this far. Let me know in the comments down below how you are running your Ajax, if you are running Ajax. With these changes and everything like that, I feel like you are a little bit more competitive in terms of the damage that you deal. It's not to say that the previous build doesn't work. It's a lot slower than this one and deals a lot less damage than this one. And the bottom line is, you kind of like, guys, we're doing this stuff over and over and over. So there comes a point where you want to just do it as fast as possible, that you could get your items and get the fuck out. So definitely I wanted to try and get us into that mode where we could just go super fast and go, while at the same time playing a, I would say, different kind of Descendant that, yeah, I mean, you could just blow up entire groups of enemies that are naturally just running at you. The AoEs are awesome. Jumping around is awesome. That's still in place. And yeah, you can pull off some pretty sweet moves. So yeah. But thank you very much for the support. As I said, it's been fantastic, guys. Keep watching. Lots more videos coming. And as always, fucking cheers.